I'm a leaner Vance, 82 years old, a woman, and my favorite granddaughter tried to kick me out of my own home. It's a sentence that feels foreign on my tongue, like a language I never learned. At my age, you think you've seen every shade of human nature, every color of joy, and every shadow of pain. You think you've built your life on a foundation so solid, so deep that nothing can shake it. My foundation was love, and my home was its temple. I had lived in this house for 54 years. I came here as a bride, my hand in my husband Robert's, his laughter echoing off the bare wooden floors that first day. We filled this house with life, with the smell of Sunday dinners, the sound of our son Michael's first steps, and later, the giggles of his own child, my granddaughter Isabel. Robert passed 10 years ago now, but his presence lingers in the scent of old books in his study and in the sturdy oak tree he planted in the backyard, its branches now thick and strong enough to hold the sky up. This house isn't just wood and nails, it's a library of my life, and every room holds a precious volume. And they wanted to sell it for spare parts. Isabel was my heart walking around outside my body. From the moment Michael placed her in my arms, a tiny, perfect bundle wrapped in a pink blanket, I was utterly and completely devoted to her. Michael and his wife were good parents but busy. They were building their careers, and I had the time, the patience, and a boundless well of love to pour into that child. Isabel became the daughter I never had. When she was 5, she fell in love with a ridiculously expensive doll in a toy store window, a porcelain thing with glassy eyes and real silk for hair. My son told her it was too much, a lesson in wanting what you can't have. The next day, I went back and bought it for her. The look of pure, unadulterated joy on her face when I gave it to her was worth more than any price tag. That was the first time, I suppose, that I taught her that grandma's love could bend the rules. As she grew, the pattern continued. When she was 16, she wanted a car, not just any car, but a little red convertible she'd seen in a movie. Michael and her mother had a sensible sedan picked out for her, safe and reliable, but Isabel came to me, her eyes wide and pleading. "Grandma," she'd said, her voice a sweet melody, "it's my dream car, I'll feel so free." And what is a grandmother for if not to make dreams come true? I took a significant portion from my savings, the money Robert and I had earmarked for a cruise we never got to take, and I helped her buy that little red car. Michael was furious. "You're spoiling her, Mom," he had warned, his face tight with concern. "She needs to learn the value of a dollar. She needs to understand that you don't always get what you want just by asking." I had simply smiled and said, "There's plenty of time for her to learn about limits. Let her be happy now." I see now that Michael wasn't trying to be a killjoy. He was trying to be a father. He saw a weed of entitlement taking root that I saw only as the beautiful, vibrant bloom of his daughter's happiness. The biggest indulgence came when she met Leo. He was handsome, I'll give him that. He had a smile that could sell sand in the desert and a way of talking about the future that made it sound like a golden city just over the horizon. He was, in his own words, a tech entrepreneur, though I never quite understood what he produced other than complicated charts and a constant need for seed money. When they decided to get married, they wanted a grand affair, something far beyond their means. Isabel came to me, Leo standing just behind her, his hand on her shoulder. They spoke of a fairy tale wedding and how it would be the perfect launch for their life together. I saw the stars in my granddaughter's eyes, the same ones I'd had when I looked at Robert, and my heart melted. I paid for the wedding, all of it. The lavish reception hall, the towering cake, the dress that looked like it was spun from moonlight. At the reception, Leo gave a toast. He raised his glass to me, calling me their guardian angel and their rock. He said, "To a leaner who understands that investing in family is the greatest investment of all." At the time, I wept with pride. Looking back, I see the cold, hard calculation in his eyes. He wasn't toasting a grandmother. He was toasting a bank. The day it all fell apart started like any other Tuesday. I spent the morning tending to my roses, their velvet petals a soft comfort against my worn fingers. The sun was warm on my back, and the familiar rhythm of my life was a soothing balm. Isabel had called the night before, her voice buzzing with an artificial sweetness that should have been a warning sign. "Grandma, Leo and I were just thinking, we haven't seen you in forever. Can we pop by tomorrow? We have the most wonderful idea to share with you." "Of course, honey," I'd said why heart lifting at the thought of seeing her. "You know my door is always open." They arrived just after lunch, not with a simple pie or a bouquet of flowers as they sometimes did, but with a glossy folder and an air of momentous purpose. Isabel swept into the house, kissing me on both cheeks and filling the air with her expensive perfume. Grandma, you look wonderful. Doesn't she look wonderful, Leo? Leo followed her in, carrying a briefcase that seemed entirely out of place in my cozy living room. He smiled that salesman's smile. Radiant as ever, Alina, truly. I offered them iced tea, the way I always did, and we sat in the living room, me in my worn armchair that had molded to my shape over the years, and them perched together on the edge of the sofa, a united front. The glossy folder sat on the coffee table between us, a silent, ominous guest. So I began, trying to keep things light. What's this wonderful idea you wanted to share? Isabel reached out and took my hands in hers. Her skin was smooth, her nails perfectly manicured. Mine were wrinkled, the knuckles swollen slightly with arthritis. Grandma, we love you so much, she began, and because we love you, we've been worried about you. I felt a prickle of confusion. Worried about me? Child, I'm fit as a fiddle. Dr. Evans said I have the blood pressure of a woman half my age. Leo leaned forward, his expression a careful mask of sincerity. It's not about your health, Alina. It's about this big old house. You're all alone here. The upkeep must be a nightmare. The property taxes keep going up. What if you fell? Who would know? Every word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall of logic around me that was meant to feel like protection but felt more like a cage. I have my neighbors, I said quietly. I have my phone. I have lived in this house for most of my life. It's not a burden, it's my home. Isabel squeezed my hands tighter. We know, Grandma, we know how much you love it, but we have a solution, a way for us all to be together to take care of each other. She finally slid the glossy folder across the table. Leo and I have been thinking, we're ready to start a family, we need a bigger place, and you need family around you. I opened the folder. Inside were architectural drawings, pristine computer-generated images of a massive, modern house with a lot of glass and sharp angles. It was cold, impersonal, nothing like the warm embrace of my own home. We want to buy a new house, Grandma, Isabel said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. A big one with a beautiful in-law suite for you. You'd have your own space, but we'd be right there. I could cook for you. We could watch our shows together. It would be perfect. I stared at the drawings, a cold dread seeping into my bones. I knew even before she said the next words what the price of this perfect life would be. And how, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, are you planning to afford a house like this? Leo spoke up, his tone all business. That's the genius of it, Alina. We leverage our assets, all of us. He tapped the folder. We've already spoken to a real estate agent. Your property in this market, it's a gold mine. The land alone is worth a fortune. If we sell this house and our little condo, we'll have more than enough for a down payment on our dream home, the home we want to share with you. There it was, the ugly, brutal truth dressed up in the language of love and concern. They wanted to sell my home. They wanted to uproot me from the soil where my entire life was planted and replant me in a sterile pot in a corner of their new, shiny life. They weren't giving me a gift, they were presenting me with an invoice. I pulled my hands from Isabel's grasp. You want to sell my house, I stated, the words tasting like ash. Robert's house. It's for the best, Grandma, Isabel insisted, her sweet facade beginning to crack, revealing the impatience beneath. This house is an anchor holding us all back. Think of the future. Think of the family we can build. I have a family, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of the strength I thought had deserted me. I thought you were it, and this house is my future, it's my past, it's everything. The air grew thick and heavy. Leo, seeing the negotiation was failing, changed tactics from persuasion to pronouncement. Alina, he said, his voice losing its manufactured warmth, we've already put things in motion, we've had the house appraised. We've even spoken to a developer who is very interested in the lot. This is happening. We hoped you'd be happy about it, but the decision is frankly made. We're doing this for you, for us, it's time. The finality in his voice was like a slap. This wasn't a proposal, it was a verdict. They had sat in my living room, drunk my iced tea, and passed judgment on my life. They had weighed my 54 years of memories against a RIA. L estate valuation and found them wanting. You need to start packing a few things, Isabel added, now all brisk efficiency. Just the essentials, the things that really matter. The movers for the rest of it will come next month. I felt the room tilt. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I looked at my granddaughter's face, searching for the little girl who loved porcelain dolls and red convertibles. But she was gone. In her place was a stranger, a cool-eyed woman who looked at me not with love, but with the impatient pity one might show a stubborn piece of furniture that refuses to be moved. They left soon after that. The silence they left behind was louder than any argument. It was a screaming, echoing void where love and trust used to be. I didn't walk them to the door. I just sat in my armchair, frozen, clutching the glossy folder of their new life, a life built on the rubble of mine. I heard the front door click shut, and the sound seemed to sever the last thread connecting me to the woman I thought I knew. For a long time, I didn't move. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, tracing patterns on the carpet that I had known my whole life. It illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, insignificant particle, just as I now felt. The house, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a tomb. Every object seemed to mock me. The photo on the mantelpiece of a smiling, 7-year-old Isabel on my lap. The hand-painted mug she made me for Mother's Day when she was 10, its world's best grandma, lettering now a cruel joke. The Afghan she draped over the back of the sofa, a Christmas gift from last year, suddenly felt heavy and suffocating. They had said, just pack the things that really matter. How do you pack a memory? How do you fold up the feeling of your husband's arms around you in the kitchen? How do you put the sound of your son's laughter into a cardboard box? The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it stole my breath. They had reduced my existence to a collection of trinkets and declared themselves the arbiters of what was valuable. I finally stood up, my joints creaking in protest, and walked through the house as if I were a ghost. I ran my hand along the wallpaper in the hallway, a pattern of climbing roses Robert and I had picked out together. I remember him on the ladder, a smudge of paste on his nose, whistling a tune from the radio. I walked into his study, untouched since he passed. His reading glasses were still on the desk next to a copy of a history book. The room smelled of him, of old paper, pipe tobacco, and integrity. I sank into his big leather chair, the worn leather cool against my skin, and I finally let the tears come. They weren't loud, histrionic sobs. They were silent, scalding tears that tracked paths through the wrinkles on my cheeks. It was a grief deeper than the one I felt when Robert died. That loss, as vast and empty as it was, had been an act of God. This was an act of betrayal, an act of will by someone I loved more than I loved myself. It was a different kind of death. It was the death of an idea, the idea of family, of loyalty, of the sacred bond between a grandmother and her grandchild. The phrase, "we've already put things in motion," played over and over in my mind. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea born of desperation. This was a calculated plot. They had been meeting with realtors and developers behind my back. They had looked at my home, this repository of our family's soul, and saw only square footage and market value. They had smiled in my face, eaten my cooking, and accepted my love, all while planning its demolition. The premeditation was the cruelest cut of all. As dusk fell, casting long, sorrowful shadows across the living room, a new feeling began to curdle in the pit of my stomach, mingling with the grief, anger. It was a slow, simmering heat. How dare they stand in Robert Vance's house and declare it for sale? How dare they talk about what was best for me as if I were a child, a senile old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own life? They had underestimated me. They saw an 82-year-old widow, frail and alone. They saw a soft heart and an open checkbook. They had forgotten that I was Eleanor Vance, the woman who had managed a household budget through lean times and flush, who had nursed a sick husband, raised a good son, and navigated 8 decades of this world's trials. They had forgotten that this soft heart was housed in a spine made of steel. The night that followed was a desolate country with no dawn in sight. Sleep was a distant shore I couldn't reach. I lay in the bed I had shared with Robert for nearly 50 years, the space beside me a cold, empty expanse. The house made its usual noises, the groan of the pipes, the whisper of the wind in the eaves, but tonight they sounded different. They sounded mournful, like the house itself was groaning under the weight of thigh. As betrayal. My mind, refusing to rest, became a cinema of memories. I saw Isabel as a toddler, her chubby legs churning as she ran across the backyard lawn, squealing with delight as Robert tossed her in the air. I saw her at her high school graduation, her face bright with promise, waving at me from the stage. I saw her on her wedding day, a vision in white, and the memory of my own tears of joy now felt like a bitter mockery. How could that girl, the one whose every triumph had been my own, turn into the cold-eyed stranger who had sat on my sofa that afternoon? I thought of my son, Michael. He and his wife had moved to Arizona 5 years ago for her health, and while we spoke on the phone every Sunday, the distance was a tangible ache. What would he think of this? Would he side with his daughter, believing this monstrous plan was truly for my own good? The thought sent a fresh wave of despair over me. The fear of being utterly alone in this fight was a physical weight on my chest. I got out of bed, the floorboards cool beneath my feet, and pulled on my old chenille robe. I went to the living room and sat in my armchair in the dark, the moonlight painting silver stripes on the floor. I picked up the photograph from the mantelpiece, the one of Isabel on my lap. I traced the outline of her small, happy face with my thumb. Where did I go wrong? Was Michael right all those years ago? Had my love been a kind of poison, spoiling her, teaching her that the world and her grandmother existed solely to grant her wishes? It was a terrible, agonizing thought that my own deep love had forged the weapon now being used against me. I must have sat there for hours, lost in a labyrinth of memory and regret. I felt old, not just in my bones and my skin, but in my soul. I felt weary, as if the fight had already been fought and lost. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps it was time to give up, to retreat into a small, sterile room and fade away, leaving the world to the young and the ruthless. The temptation to surrender was a siren song, promising an end to the pain, a quiet harbor of defeat. But then my gaze fell upon the portrait of Robert on the wall opposite me. It was his official photograph from his time as a deacon at our church, his expression serious but his eyes kind. He looked so strong, so steadfast. Robert was not a man of many words, but his actions spoke volumes. He was a man of principle. He believed in hard work, in honesty, and in protecting what was yours. And one night long ago, when a shady contractor had tried to cheat us on a roof repair, Robert had stood on this very porch, calm as a summer morning, and told the man, "You will not take advantage of this family, not on my watch." He hadn't raised his voice, but his resolve was absolute. The contractor had fixed the roof properly the very next day. Looking at his portrait, I could almost hear his voice in my head, a low, steady rumble. "What are you doing, Aliner? Are you just going to let them roll over you? You are the matriarch of this family. This is your home. You don't just give it away." A flicker of something warm and bright ignited in the cold darkness of my heart. It was defiance. It was Robert's spirit. It was my own strength buried under layers of grief and shock beginning to stir. I had spent the night mourning the death of the granddaughter I thought I had, but the dawn was coming, and with it, a new clarity. I could not change who Isabel had become, but I could and I would control my own destiny. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The sun hadn't risen yet, but my own personal darkness was beginning to recede. I wasn't just a sad old woman in a big house. I was Eleanor Vance, and this was my watch. The first rays of sunlight streaked the sky, the pale pink and orange a promise of a new day. I felt as if I had aged a decade in a single night, but I also felt a strange sense of calm. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. I went into the kitchen, my movements deliberate and steady, and made myself a pot of coffee, the rich aroma a small, familiar comfort. As I sipped the hot, black liquid, I laid out my plan. It was simple, it was direct. And it started with a phone call. There was only one person I could trust completely, one person who knew Robert's heart and who understood the sacredness of legacy. James Peterson. He had been Robert's best friend since they were boys playing stickball in the street. He had been the best man at our wedding and the executor of Robert's will. He was a semi-retired lawyer, but everyone knew his mind was as sharp as it had been 40 years ago. He was family in the way that matters most. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice a gravelly but welcome sound. "James Peterson." "James," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's Eleanor Vance." Eleanor, it's good to hear your voice. How are you holding up? Everything all right?" The simple kindness in his question almost broke me, but I held firm. "Not exactly, James. I need your help. I need a lawyer." The line was silent for a moment. "Eleanor, what's happened? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath and told him everything. I recounted the visit from Isabel and Leo, their glossy folder, their talk of selling my house and moving me into their in-law suite. I told him about the developers and the appraisers, the whole cold, calculated plan. As I spoke, I could feel his silence transforming from concerned listening into a simmering rage on my behalf. When I finished, there was another long pause, then he spoke and his voice was low and dangerous. That ungrateful, he caught himself taking a breath. Eleanor, I am so sorry. I am so sorry you are going through this. To think that Isabel, the little girl Robert and I used to take for ice cream, it's unthinkable. It had happened, James, I said, my voice flat. And they think it's a done deal. They told me to start packing. Like hell you will, he shot back, all the grandfatherly warmth gone, replaced by the sharp-edged lawyer he was. You listen to me, Eleanor, first things first, the deed to that house. It's in your name and your name alone, correct? Robert made sure of that. Yes, I confirmed. He always said a woman should have a roof over her head that was hers and hers alone. God bless that man, James said. Okay, that's our fortress. They can't sell it without your signature. Period. Their conversations with realtors and developers are just hot air. They have no legal authority to do anything. A wave of relief washed over me so powerful it made me dizzy. So they can't force me. They can't force you to do a damn thing, he said with conviction. Now we need to go on the offensive. They want to play hardball, we can play it better. First, we send them a formal cease and desist letter. We'll have it delivered by courier this afternoon. It will state in no uncertain terms that they are to have no further contact with any real estate agents, developers, or any other party regarding the property at your address. It will also state that they are not welcome on the property themselves until further notice. The idea of formally barring Isabel from my home sent a pang through my heart, but I knew it was necessary. It was drawing a line in the sand. Okay, I whispered. Second, he continued, his mind clearly working fast, you mentioned a joint savings account they were helping you with. Yes, it was an account Robert and I had. After he passed, Isabel said she could help me manage it online, make sure the bills were paid. She's a co-signer. Eleanor, I want you to go to the bank this morning. The minute it opens, I want you to close that account and transfer every single penny into a new account in your name only. Don't even hesitate. We don't know what they've been doing with that access. The thought that they might have been stealing from me on top of everything else was sickening, but I knew James was right. I had been too trusting. And third, he said, his voice softening slightly, your will. I know Isabel is the executor and the primary beneficiary. This was the hardest part. It felt so final, so absolute. Yes, I said quietly. Eleanor, this is your decision, but you need to protect your legacy. The house, your savings, Robert worked his entire life for that. It was for you, to give you security. It was not to fund some get-rich-quick scheme for Leo. You need to think about what you want to happen to your estate. We can change it today. We can set up a trust. We can leave it to a charity you believe in. We can leave it to Michael and put it in a trust for any future grandchildren he might have. But leaving it in the hands of that girl and her husband right now, that would be like throwing it into a fire. He was right. My legacy wasn't just money and property. It was a testament to a life of hard work, love, and principle. To let it be squandered by greed would be the ultimate betrayal of Robert's memory. Change it, I said, my voice hard as iron. Remove her, as executor and as a beneficiary, all of it. I want to set up a scholarship fund at our church in Robert's name. The rest can go to Michael in trust. Consider it done, James said. I'll draw up the paperwork immediately. You come to my office this afternoon after you've been to the bank. We'll get it all signed and notarized. Eleanor, he paused. You are doing the right thing. You are strong. Robert would be so proud of you right now. I hung up the phone, my body buzzing with a nervous energy that was almost euphoric. The fog of grief had lifted completely, burned away by the bright, hot sun of action. I was no longer a victim waiting for the inevitable. I was a queen defending her castle. I looked around. My living room at the home they had tried to steal, and I felt not sadness, but a fierce, protective love. They had started a war. They had no idea I was about to win it. 3 days passed, 3 days of profound, unbelievable peace. After my visit to the bank in James's office, I had felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The new will was signed, the cease and desist letter was delivered, and my money was secure in an account that only I could touch. For the first time in years, I was in complete control of my own life. I spent the time reclaiming my house. I baked a lemon pound cake, filling the rooms with a sweet, happy scent. I worked in my garden, my hands in the dirt, feeling grounded and strong. I even took down the photo of Isabel from the mantelpiece. It was a small act, but it was a declaration. This was my space now. The confrontation came on Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes and listening to the gospel station on the radio when I saw them through the window over the sink. Leo's fancy car, a silver convertible I had no doubt helped pay for, screeched to a halt at the curb. Isabel and Leo got out, their movements jerky and angry. They stormed up the walkway, Isabel clutching a piece of paper in her hand, the letter from James, I presumed. I dried my hands, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. I was not afraid. I walked to the front door, and before they could knock, I opened it, but only as far as the security chain would allow. It left a gap of about 5 inches, a small, unbridgeable chasm between us. They stopped dead on the porch, surprised to see me looking so composed. Isabel's face was a mess of fury and disbelief. Leo just looked furious. "Grandma, what is the meaning of this?" Isabel shrieked, waving the letter. "A cease and desist? Are you kidding me? We're your family." "My family doesn't try to sell my home out from under me," I said, my voice even and cool. "We were trying to help you," Leo cut in, stepping forward aggressively. "We were trying to build a future for all of us, and you go and call some lawyer and lock us out after everything we've done for you." I almost laughed at the sheer audacity of that statement. "Everything you've done for me, child, let's be clear. I paid for your fairy tale wedding. I helped buy your first car. I have given you love, time, and money your entire life. What you tried to do was not help. It was theft wrapped in a bow of false concern." Isabel's face crumpled. The anger was replaced by a theatrical sort of desperation. "Grandma, no, you don't understand. The developer, we had a deal. Leo's business, we were counting on that money. We might lose the deposit on the new house." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said, channeling a calm I didn't know I possessed. "It seems you built your future on a foundation that didn't belong to you. Now the foundation is gone." "But what are we supposed to do?" she wailed, tears now streaming down her face. They looked real, but I suspected they were just another tool of manipulation. "Our landlord for the condo found a new tenant. We have to be out by the end of the month. We have nowhere to go." "There are apartments for rent all over this city," I said simply. "You might have to live within your means. It's a lesson you are long overdue to learn." Leo's patience snapped completely. "You old fool," he snarled, his handsome face twisting into an ugly mask. "You'd rather sit here and rot in this dusty museum than help your own family? We gave you a golden opportunity." "This dusty museum is my home," I retorted, my voice rising for the first time, sharp and clear. "It was built with the love and hard work of a man whose shoes you are not fit to shine. You didn't give me an opportunity, you gave me an ultimatum. You saw me as an obstacle to be managed, a resource to be plundered. You didn't see me at all." I looked directly at Isabel, past her crocodile tears into her eyes. "And you," I said, my voice softening with a deep, bottomless sorrow. "You were my heart. I would have done anything for you, Isabel, anything but this. An inheritance is not just money and property. It's the values a family passes down. It's love, respect, integrity. That was the real inheritance I tried to give you, and you threw it away for square footage and a bigger kitchen." I let that hang in the air for a moment. I could see in her eyes that, for a fleeting second, the truth of my words hit her, but it was quickly replaced by the panic of her own self-inflicted problems. "So that's it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're just cutting us off." "No, honey," I said, and the endearment was now laced with iron. "You cut yourselves off when you decided my home and my life were yours for the taking. I am simply closing the door you already walked out of." And with that, I pushed the heavy oak door shut. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently, definitively. I heard Isabel let out a cry of frustration on the other side. I heard Leo cursing. Then I heard their footsteps retreating down the walk and the sound of their car speeding away. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, the chain still in place. My fortress had held. In the silence that followed, I didn't feel triumph, not in the way you see in movies. I didn't feel a rush of victorious adrenaline. I felt a profound and quiet sense of peace. It was the peace of a battle finally over, the peace of a fever that has finally broken. I walked back into my kitchen, the sunlight streaming in and the gospel music still playing softly on the radio. A hymn about grace and deliverance, how fitting. I finished washing the last of the breakfast dishes, my movements slow and rhythmic. The house felt bigger, brighter. It was as if their greedy, desperate energy had been a physical presence, a layer of grime coating everything, and now it had been scrubbed clean. The air was lighter, I could breathe again. Later that afternoon, I called my son Michael. I told him everything, my voice steady as I recounted the whole sordid affair. He was silent for a long time on the other end of the line, and I braced myself for his reaction. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Mom, he said, I am so sorry. I knew she was entitled. I tried to warn you. I never ever imagined she would do something like this. I am ashamed and I am heartbroken for you. It's all right, Michael, I said, and I meant it. I handled it. You did more than handle it, Mom, he said, a note of awe in his voice. You're amazing. He would be so proud. Hearing those words from my son, knowing I had his support, was the final piece of healing I needed. We talked for over an hour, truly talked for the first time in a long time. The crisis had, in a strange way, brought us closer. The days that followed settled into a new kind of normal, a better normal. My life was my own again. The scholarship fund in Robert's name was established at the church, and the thought of it helping young people get a start in life brought me a quiet joy that no amount of money in my bank account ever could. My home was no longer a place of potential conflict, but a sanctuary of my own making. I hosted my church group for tea. I spent long afternoons reading in Robert's study. I sat on my porch and watched the world go by, not as a lonely old woman, but as the quiet, contented queen of my own small kingdom. I don't know what happened to Isabel and Leo. I heard through the grapevine that they were living in a small, rented apartment across town. I hope for her sake that she learns something from all this. I hope one day she understands what she truly lost. It wasn't a house. It was a home, but her journey is her own now. I cannot walk it for her. I have my own path to tend to. I learned something in my 82nd year of life. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to say no, to draw a line, to teach a lesson no matter how painful. For years, I thought my love was a limitless resource, a fountain that should never run dry, but love without respect is just fuel for selfishness. True love has boundaries, it has strength, it demands to be honored. My home is quiet now, filled only with memories and peace. And it is more valuable than ever. And that's my story. Thank you for listening.